So let's start with collections. Okay, now we're going to start with collections API in Java. Okay, we'll basically focus on two types of interfaces or two types of uh, packages that Java gives you to handle with collections, because you are dealing with Selenium, right? And there are two types of data that we'll be dealing. One data type is called a list. That's a list is an interface in Java. Okay, as you might be remembering, inheritance, you have the interfaces, then you have some classes to use the interfaces, right? So you must be having some class, like list has certain classes, certain implementations, we call them, like there are many, but we'll mostly focus into ArrayList. Okay, ArrayList is something which is going to store homogeneous data, like data of same type. Like you had array, you're going to use ArrayList the same way. You're going to use indexes to get the data out of ArrayList. So, but it has certain benefits over array that we'll discuss in more in depth. Then we have map. Map is something which is going to keep it's going to keep a dictionary type variable. As you might be working, if somebody knows Macintosh, like OS X program, that has a data type which is called key value, which is called dictionary. So it's going to keep a key, and against that key it's going to keep a value. So you're going to put two different values into the map, and you can put as many number of key value pairs as you want into the map, but the key type and value type that are going to be constant throughout the life cycle of the map. So map is an interface. Again, you have lots of implementations, but we'll focus mostly on the hash map implementation. That's the very basic implementation of map interface in Java. So let's let's go to our class. Let me show you how you can create uh, a list and how you can create a hash map in Java. Okay, let's create a new Java project. Let's to tell you collections example. Okay, and let's create a new class, new Java class, com dot example dot collections. Let's call it list example. So this is your class, right? List example. Let's create list example.java. It's public by default. You have list example. Let's maximize this window. Okay, now you have a list interface. Let me give you one example, like why we are going to use list. So first, generally when you need to store some data, suppose you want to store the different marks of a student in like all the subjects, what are the mark the student has scored in different subjects, you want to store that. So the first subject he has scored 23, then he has scored like 24, this third one is scoring like 20, 22. So these are the different marks that student has scored. So these are different marks, but they are of the same type, right? This is an integer, this is again integer. So all the integer types you're going to store. So generally the first thing that comes into your mind, you can create an integer array that's going to store all the data. And what is this like restriction that Java has made to you is, like you have to be very sure about how many data you are going to keep into that array. 1 2 3 4 5. So while defining the integer array like marks equal to new int array, but here you are going to define the size. That's mandatory, right? That is mandatory when you are creating the integer array. So let's do one thing. Let's create an integer array which is going to store the user. What do you call it? User marks, right? Okay. Now let's create a main method, and let's put the values of the integer array. Marks 0. When you are trying to access an array, you are going to do it this way. Next array, you are going to put the value. So first value we got is 23. Then, come on, what happened? Save it now. Let's see that. Marks static. Okay, static and good. Okay, first one is 23. Similarly, I'll create 4 different one. This is 4, 3, 2. This is 1, 23, 24, 20, 22 and 21. So these are the different marks obtained by a student. So we are creating an array and we are putting the values. Okay, the first problem with this approach is, if you want to create a new element, if you want to put the next mark of a student, suppose sometime it comes and you need to put the fifth element into it, suppose that is 25, the highest mark is obtained, but you cannot keep that. Okay, that becomes a problem. You cannot keep the fifth element, the sixth element into the array, because you have defined it as 5. So what is the problem that you will face? Let's create sys out the marks array. But as mark is an array, you cannot print it directly. We are going to use a for loop, and that for loop we are going to create an int mark colon marks. So this is the way how you are going to create now I'm going to put the values, print the values from the marks, but I need to print the value of mark. Now I'm going to call this method 2-3 more times, so I'm going to create a new method, okay, which is going to like static private. This is going to be this is going to be private, because I'm not going to call it from outside. Private static, and it's not going to return anything, void display marks, and it's going to receive mark. Okay, mark is public, it's outside the scope of the mark is the class, so I don't need to pass the values in the in this while calling this method, so I can directly print this way. Okay, I can directly print it this way. Now what is going to happen while putting these values? I'm just going to call display marks. Okay, so it will display whatever mark value is there. Now I'm trying to add one more value, then I'm going to call this method again. So what's going to happen? As I have already told you, in arrays you don't have the option to increase the size of the buckets that you have created in array. The array size is 5, so you already have inserted 5 elements. If you want to insert something in the fifth element, it's going to create a problem. You cannot like increase the size during runtime. So let's run this problem, let's run this code and see what is going to happen. Right click, run as in Java application. You can see first it has printed all the values. 23 exception, what is this? Exception in thread and 0 1 2 3 4. Can't understand what's happening. Okay, I think I need to run it again. It's not giving proper output. Yeah, now the output is fine. You can see the first time when I call, like I have entered 5 elements. Okay, in the same order it has like printed them. Okay, here you can see the display method, marks object method. It has printed all the values in the marks array. Then after calling display, then I try to insert the fifth element, that is at marks index 5, that's the sixth element, but it's giving me some error that array index out of bounds. So what happens in Java is, once you define an array and that has a particular size, if you want to access something out, like apart from that size, the boundary, if you go beyond that, it's going to give you this error, this exception. Okay, what is exception? I'll tell you something like, this is something which doesn't let your code flow ahead. At least I should have called to this method, but when it tried to access this line, it failed and it didn't even execute the next line. So if in a program you face certain problem which is going to create certain exception, then your program execution is going to stop. So what are those things we'll discuss in next class, but let's focus on the array list part now. So this is just an array, the general implementation that you already had in your mind. Let's go to array list implementation. Let's see how array lists work and how they are different. So the problem which you faced over here is you cannot increase the size. Okay, if you want to perform certain operation using like calling some method, that is not available, because marks is it's not an object, it's an array. It's an array of like what do we call it, the default data types, right? It's not an object array, it's an simple array. Suppose you want to add some certain features into that array, you want to do certain logic on that array, so you need to write your own logic. So Java has created a class, it has created an interface which is called the list interface. Let's create a list interface. Just below that we can create an object of list. So let's create a main method which is already there, but we need to modify the name. Okay, let's change this. It's a static. I'm not going to create an int array, I'm going to create a list. This list is an interface, okay, which you need to import from java.util package. So let's import that using control and space. It says java.util.list. Implement that. You double click, then it asks for the data type. Within these brackets, you are going to specify the type of data. I'm going to type int, but int is not an object. It's not an not an interface, it's not an entity. You cannot define int. You have to define a class or an interface. So what we are going to do here is we are going to use the class integer. So this is one class which Java has given us. That is similar to int object only. So this is integer object. I'm going to store some integers and I'm going to call it an integer list. So that's going to be a marks, and I'm going to create a new array list. So this is the class which I'm going to call. So this is going to call its constructor. If you import it from java.util.arraylist, it will ask you what type of data. We have already said it's an integer type. You need to define the type. Then this is the way you call this is the class name. Basically this array list, it's the class name. This is the type of data that is going to be put into array list, and you're going to call the constructor. So you need to give two brackets. So it has now created a marks array list, but we don't define any size like we defined in case of list, right? So this array list is ready to take any number of integers you want to give it to him. So then let's go to our main method like we have created earlier. I'm going to add certain values. I'm going to add certain integer values to this uh, array list that we have created. Let's go to the top, let's keep it there. Let's create this array list. Now I need to import array list java util.list. Okay, now it's there. Now we have created mark. This way it's not going to work, because this is how we used to deal with the array. We used to give the index within brackets. Let's comment these things and plus star. So this is how you give multi-line comments, right? So you can also give a single line comment. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to add these values into the array list. To add some value into the array list, how you are going to do that? To add, you need to call marks.add method, add. So this add method, you can see the data type is integer. So only integer data is allowed, because you have defined integer while creating the marks, right? While creating this array list, you have defined the type as integer. So I'm going to add some integer value over here. That's, you can directly give 23. It will be automatically implicitly converted into its integer object, because it's an int data type, but it is indirectly converted into integer. For more clarity, you can create new integer and you can pass the value of 23 into that. So it's going to create a new integer object and it's going to add that value into this marks interface. Marks list. Okay, let's do that way for rest of the fifth elements, 5 elements. Okay, and okay, come on, no, it's not working here. Okay, 23, then there is 20, then you have 22, you have 24, suppose 24, then you have 21. So these are the different 5 different marks of a student which I have added. Now I try to display it. So when you are trying to display the marks, again in the display method you have already used the for each method, so you don't need to change anything. It is going to assume that it's collection of marks, it's a list of marks, and it'll take the values from that and it'll print that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the sixth element, right? So I'm going to paste this line over here. So I'm going to pass 25. So it can show some exception, right? But when I'm trying to add some value into this marks list, it's going to increase the size automatically so that it can accommodate the next element. Let's run this method and see if our approach is good or not. Like how interfaces like list interface, Java collection, it has helped you. Let's see this. So first it has tried to print the values of from 23, 20, 20, 23. So these are the values which it has printed. We can use a separator which will tell us exactly when the first display ended. Okay, let's run it again. Let's see the output. Okay, you can see the output. The first 5 elements it has printed, then it has added the fifth element, sixth element. at the end, and it has printed. So there is no error with the size restriction is gone. Like, so there are different methods available in list interface. So if you want to go into the depth of like whatever methods are available in that, you can use this control space in Eclipse. So when you do control space, you can see there are a lot many methods. The first one is size. It will tell you what is the size of the list at that very point of time. So if I print the size over here, it's going to say 5. Okay, sys out. Let me show you size of list. It's going to be size, sorry, marks, one second, marks dot size. So this is going to print the size is 5, but when you add this element, if you want to print this, it's going to say the size is 6th element, size is 6. So because it has added the 6th element, so let's run this method and see what is happening. Size is 5 at the end of this. When then I added one more element and print the size, it's saying 6, and the last element is 25, that is the 6th element. So this is how generally lists work in Java. So how it is going to help you in Selenium? Let me give you one example. Suppose in Selenium you have got like 3 different students name displayed on a web page, or 3 different profile or username, 3 different elements you can see on the screen, and all the elements are of similar type. So you might be interested in all the elements. You might be interested in getting the values of all the 3 elements. So that 3 elements or 5 elements, or it can be 100 elements, you are not sure about. It depends on the application and its state at that point of time. So when you face such a scenario and you want to accommodate any number of values that are displayed on the screen, similar UI elements, you are going to use a particular method in Selenium, which is going to give you the list of all those elements. It's going to give you the list. It's not going to give you the array. It will give you the list of all the elements. So you can use one element at a time, as we have done over here using for each loop. Then once you have one element, you can do whatever you want to do that on that element. You can get the value of that element, you can click, or you can perform something on that element. Then again the second element will come, you can do on the second element. So this is basically just to help you out to store multiple data of the same type. So this is how list works, and there are a lot many methods in list. You can always do control space and you can go, you can use clear method, it will clear all the value. And the best part is in Eclipse you will get the documentation over here. If you are not getting the documentations, you can search in Google. It will help you out with adding the attachments like documents, documentation jar into your project, so that you can see the documentation in Eclipse. So if you have any doubt in any like methods of list, you can see, you can find the example, like the details over here, the description, the Java doc over here. If not itself, then you can search on Google, then you can ask me, okay, do whatever you want. But in list, these are the most important methods. One is add, and then you can clear. If you want to clear the list, you can, suppose I want to clear the list now. So I can use marks dot clear. So it's going to make the size of list 0. No data is there. So when I'm trying to, when I'm inserting this element, it's going to be inserted at the first position and the size is going to be 1. Okay, if you want to run this, it's going to say you size is 1 second time. Okay, all the elements are gone. There are many methods in list. When you want to add one element, it's going to take only one element, right? List dot add, it's taking only one element, right? Suppose you want to insert this element, suppose you want to insert 25 at the beginning, because it's the highest mark, you want to insert 25 at the beginning. So there is one more overloaded method of add interface, of add method. You can see there are two methods of add. One is add, second one is an index value, then the integer. Suppose I want to add this 25 after 20. So this is the index 0th element, this is the 1 element, right? I want to insert it at this position, and this position is going to be called as 0, sorry, first one 0, then 1, this is going to be called as 2. So you are going to enter this value at second index location. So what you are going to do is, you can pass 2 as the index, comma, then the value. So it's going to insert the value here over here. So you will get 25, and the list size is of course increased, and all the elements that used to be over here, here and here, they are just shifted one place ahead. The size becomes one like incremented by 1, and the list, it just changes its size. So let's use this method and see what is happening. Size 0, what happened? Okay, let's do see from the beginning. 23, 20, 22, 24, and size of list is 5. Okay, then size of list is 5. Printed it. Okay, we have cleared the list, right? So you can see we have cleared this list. Now the list doesn't have anything. Okay, and if you try to access the second element, the fifth element, it's not going to work. So here it's accessing the third element using second index. So if we comment this out, you can see the list is going to add that value 25, sorry, this 25 at the second index or the third location. So the list will become first 23, 20, then 25, 22, 24 and 21 the second days. So let's run this and let's see the output. Okay, this is how it will behave. These are the elements. Size of list is 5, then size of list is 6, but it has inserted the value at the 0, 1 and second index location. That's the third position. So there are different, like, lots of methods available in list interface. You can always like go and search for the best one available, and I'll send you certain questions on list and its implementation, and so that I believe you'll get to know a lot of methods in list. Okay, so this is how list works. So if you have any doubt on list, you can ask me. Be little louder, yeah. Sorry, list is a mm-hmm. This way, list, then the type integer marks equal to new array list. Okay, what's the problem over here? What you want? Right. Yeah, we have used interface as the reference. Okay, so this is the interface which is as used as the reference, but we are assigning the value of the, like, the object created, that reference of the object, array list object, we are assigning to that. So this is a class whose object is created, but as list is a super class of array list, list can accommodate super. This is the interface. List is the interface. So this is the super class, so super entity. So it's going to like accommodate any class object that's a subclass of that. So it's a direct subclass. So we can do this way, or if you want to do it in the other way, you can always go for array list. It's going to show no error at all. It's not going to show any error. But what happens, now the number of methods, they are specific to array list, and it might like change in future, but it doesn't change that way. But it's generally a good practice to remember this approach of like calling of creating the object of the child class and giving it to the reference of the super class or super interface. In that case, yeah, in that case, what will happen? Of the super class API, yeah, you will be only like only this class, this interface, whatever methods are available in this interface, that is going to be available to you when you do control space after marks. Okay, only those methods will be available of list, not of array list. But array list will have those methods because it's compulsory, and if array list has some more methods available in array list, you are not going to get them. Okay, you will only get the list interface methods. Any more doubt in list? Yeah, you'll have a separate class for that. Every type of data that you have. If you are going to store a char, that's a primitive type. You have a character class, and just remember, whatever class in Java you may be thinking of that has the first letter as capital. So when you want to see about Java character class, you can always search for C capital character, CHRACTR character. For int you have integer, for double you have capital D double, for float you have capital F float. So all the type primitive data types, they have an alternative in Java objects. Okay. there are certain things, yeah, there are certain primitive types which can be automatically converted, like can be automatically casted into its type, into its object type. But if it is not supported, then you need to define it this way. If I'm not going to do like not define this one, so it's still going to work, because it will be converted into its own object, integer object implicitly.
In the declaration part, is it mandatory to use the class name?
It is, this is not, if you don't give any type, it's going to accept all types of data, because object class, which is the root of all classes, that's going to be used over here. Okay, so if you
Okay.
just define list of marks and
Mm-hmm.
new array list, okay, just forget this thing. It's not going to show you any error, but it will show you one warning, which will say you that you must use a specific type of data. It's a generic type, like you are going to it's a raw type, it doesn't know what type of data it is storing. So what will happen when you try to add some value, it will ask you for object type. You can see contains object. If you try to add, you can see there is, it's asking for object, but you, for your business scenario, you just need integers. So you must, if you have the type specific ready, if you have a specific type of data to insert, then you must define its type, and it's a good practice to define the type. And even in list interface, like when you're creating the array list object, you can pass the size of the array list also. If you are sizing 4, it's going to create 4 like integer objects, 4 spaces for those objects initially. But if you keep on adding the values first, second, third and fourth, if you are, sorry, first, second, third and fourth, if you want to add the fifth element, it's not going to show you an error, it will create one more for you. If you want to run this, yeah, I can always run this, and you can see that it's not going to show you any error, because that's the problem for which we have got this interface. And one more problem with arrays is that marks dot, you cannot do dot on this, because it's not an object, it's not an object or interface, it doesn't have any method with it. But this marks list, it has lots of method with it, so you can call those methods for different purpose to, like if you want to add an element into this particular location into array, then it's on you, like how you are going to shift these elements one location ahead. So that becomes a problem, but with list these things are automatically handled. Okay, so any more problems in list, or I'll send you the questions, you go through them, and if you find any problem, you can always like ask me.